you're CEO of Sykes Holiday Cottages, one of the biggest property managers in the UK. And what's very specific about you, what you do, Graham, you're pretty transparent when it comes to, well, more transparent than others when it comes to sharing data. What does it look like on your side?
Well, I think if we go back to 2021, in the UK, we were just about to head into our third national lockdown. I think it was the 6th of January it started. And that just took the wind completely out of our sails with regards to understanding how many bookings were going to happen and the volume. And it was quite a difficult period because it's hard to predict when's it all going to come back. Is it going to come back? How quick is it going to come back? And it wasn't until the government had outlined all these steps, step 1, step 2, step 3, like a road to recovery. And it wasn't really until the 29th of March before the government sort of said, hey, now people can go and they can get together, and, where we started to sort of see things really sort of take off. Last January, February, March was not a good place. We weren't overly concerned about the volume in terms of will it come back. We knew it would come back. It's just how quickly would it come back. So it wasn't a great place for us to sort of be as an organization. Whereas 2022, I mean, we've only just started it. Our financial year actually starts in October. So we were sitting in, last year, August, last sort of September, trying to plan for 2022, really with no idea how it was going to start. No idea whether we're going to have another variant, no idea whether we're going to have another national lockdown, no idea whether consumer confidence would be, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll come back to this. When we were doing our planning and thinking about it, we were a little bit conservative, which is not normal for us. We're a bit like, was that year just a one-off? Because 2021 finished enormously beautiful, as it did for most vacation rental companies sort of globally. So we weren't really sure, but as we've come into January, we have seen a real huge sort of a surge of demand, but all of that demand seems to be quite last minute. And that's what most of my Friday posts have been the last couple of weeks. We're seeing, demand through winter we've never seen before, particularly around couples and, people just want to get away and to have a break. So winter is, as we call it, winter here, effectively in the UK. Winter is doing incredibly well, and spring is starting to do quite well. So the short lead times, but we're not quite seeing the volume we would normally see for the main summer period. And I think that comes down to one simple factor. People are just a bit nervous. They're just a bit nervous about committing. They're a bit unsure about, what may happen in the future. So they're being a bit more cautious, let's just say, about committing to things longer ahead. So, incredible sort of a late volume, also at incredibly good yield. So, huge demand. There is a lot of supply in the market because average occupancies this time of year are not like the summer. But actually, we have a pretty sophisticated yield system. We operate like an everyday low price model. So the systems are constantly monitoring supply and demand and making adjustments. So, good rate, good volume. Summer's a bit suppressed, but it's beautiful because what we have at the moment is almost like a perishable stock. And once it goes, it goes. And hopefully when the summer comes, there'll be lots of stock still available for sort of that demand to come in last minute. And I think it will. That's on the consumer side. I mean, I think what consumers really are telling us they want is they want to get away, they want to spend time, but they want flexibility. So we're also seeing a lot of our customers asking us about our cancellation policies, asking us about flexibility, asking us about, well, what if there's another version of, or variant, I should say, of the virus comes out, what's happened? So even though these people are booking, they're still a little bit sort of nervous as well. On the owner side, what we're seeing, the owner side, what we're seeing is owners they're a little bit nervous that this volume isn't coming in for the summer quite yet. And that's natural because they've just come off the back of a brilliant year and they're expecting it, to be brilliant again. But they're also they're also seeing a lot of pressure in their cost base as well, because as inflation is rising, particularly around cost of energy is rising. We are seeing more and more of our owners are, a bit worried about, how much margin they're going to continue to make, and how that sort of that rate. So it's this sort of a storm of sort of a price, value, demand, and supply that's sort of all kicking off at the moment. And it's probably quite a thin line. Who knows what will happen in the summer? Will all that demand come? And I think it will, because typically we're a constrained marketplace. But when it will come and how we're going to hold our nerve on rate versus what owners are expecting, who knows?
It's very interesting. And what do you think is the influence of, hopefully this year, cross-border travel, international travel, or travel to Europe for the UK will be easier or a bit more predictable, let's say, hopefully, than 2021 or even beginning of 2022. How do you think that may change your own prospects, in the sense that you're very strong, obviously, in the UK market? How do you think this may change maybe the demand or the yield you could be getting this summer compared with last summer?
Well, maybe we're quite a unique case, or we're different from many other vacation rental businesses, because we do not rely significantly on overseas travel. We're predominantly 90% plus domestic. When I speak to, and I'm sure you see this, when I speak to other CEOs globally who've got a strong domestic presence, most of them have done pretty well and are pretty optimistic about the future. Look, I do think restrictions are going to continue to be relaxed. I do think that people are going to be more confident to sort of travel, and we will see more cross-border travel happening, but I don't think it will be as buoyant as pure domestic. But because we don't, as a business, rely on it terribly, it doesn't really impact us. Where we do enjoy that volume, it tends to be in some of the businesses we have, say, overseas. So, in New Zealand, people come from Australia into New Zealand, or going to a business we have in Ireland, so people come from the US, etc. So I don't think it's any massive impact. But look, I think positively for everybody in the vacation rental sector, I think restrictions are going to be eased, and I'm fairly confident demand will sort of continue to come back, and probably come back at a faster rate in terms of short-term letting, because the type of accommodation it is, and the security of the accommodation, and the desire for people to get together, and probably an increased length of stay. I think that will come back quicker than some of the other categories.
Another question here is for urban market cities, London, for example, versus, let's say, cottage areas, Lake District, and the rest. So do you think this year demand will, let's hope that Omicron goes away, sorry. And do you see that demand going back to cities a bit? And then again, maybe there's maybe less pressure on less high demand for then maybe holiday rentals on the countryside. How do you see that playing out?
It's difficult to see at the moment, based on, I guess, what we're sort of the demand we're seeing. I cannot see that the volume is going to disappear that we've seen in sort of a leisure, because we've always operated in a supply constrained marketplace. There's always been so much more demand. Just more of this demand is now converting than the supply exists. As I said before, I think cities will start to recover, but I think if I was drawing a curve, I would definitely see a continued sort of acceleration away, and a strong curve in more rural areas versus cities and sort of urban areas. I think there's still more nervousness for sort of people to travel. I just don't think they'll be returning as quickly. But I do hope for the industry. I do hope there's I'm sure there'll be enough volume to sort of go around.
And how, obviously last year was so good, right? To your point, for owners, getting, a lot of bookings, high ADRs, probably terribly happy, maybe spoiled. So what do you think property managers watching this, what can they tell their owners in terms of expectations, not just expectations, but to help owners understand that things may not be, it's hard to predict how things will be, and things are in flux, and ADR can go down, for example, or can go up or stay the same, and bookings we solidify maybe in spring only. So so they have to wait. And yes, even though demand was super high last year, owners should still keep a very flexible cancellation policy. So how do you think property managers can really try to explain that to owners?
Look, I mean, the simple answer is, good communication. But I mean, all the points you make, I think, are the most important thing. First of all, communicate with your owners and be transparent about what we're seeing in the market. Talk to other property managers to qualify what you're seeing. Are you seeing something different from somebody else? And I do a lot of this, and I use people like yourself and a whole bunch of other sources to sort of calibrate what I'm seeing. So be transparent, be honest, and sort of say this was happening. But I would also be very confident still that we believe the market is going to be another really good year. But the exact shape of the market, we don't exactly know. So trust us as property managers to be good at what we do and to sort of do our job. But also don't be greedy as an owner, because there is definitely an inflection point that happens where if you push your ADRs, or you push your tools, etc., too far, there becomes this inflection point of value versus expectations. And whilst you may get bookings, what you may get is more complaints or more higher expectations or lower net promoter scores, or whatever number you're actually tracking as well. We actually faced into this last year where if we had allowed our technology or our tools or software to do what they were telling us to do, we would have kept increasing price constantly to a point where it made us feel uncomfortable. So, there's a fair price and a fair value. And when people have got a choice about whether they go overseas or whether they stay domestically or travel on a vacation rental, they'll be benchmarking it constantly. So I think owners need to understand, it's not like a limitless sort of a continual sort of a journey of constant. There's a point where you have to be sort of sensible as well. So good communication, be really clear about what you're doing to support the owners, be really clear on the expectations of customers as well. But with an overarching strong message that we're facing into, there's a lot of positive sort of a tailwinds in the industry, in the market as a whole.
My last question would be on supply. You talked about the UK, of course, being a market where there's a constraint on the supply, right? And it's and meanwhile in the US, you see big companies such as Vacasa or Vitrips making acquisitions, yet other acquisitions. How do you think this is going to play out? Does it mean as well that in markets like in the UK, it can only go one way towards consolidation? Is there things yet? Is there still again more things to consolidate? Over? How do you think will go here?
Look, I think as an industry, it doesn't matter which way I turn or which way I go. There's so many positives in terms of. I think if I step back and I think of our industry from an investor sort of a point of view, investors are saying to me, wow, this is a really interesting industry. You've got great visibility of cash, there's huge demand, you've weathered the storm through sort of a COVID, you're very resilient. And that's made it very attractive. And it's made it very attractive for, vehicles like SPACs or high multiples to be paid, or, private equity companies, or, more traditional IPOs, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's all going to continue. And that will bring more investment into the category. That will bring more probably expertise, more professionalism, more capital to produce more things. And I think it is inevitable that consolidation will happen, because, I'm sitting here today with 22,500 properties, and I think we're probably top 5 globally.
Wow.
But if we take a broad guess at how many vacation rental homes are being looked after through different platforms or property managers, whatever, globally, I think we're in the region of about 23 to 26 million, which means there's a massive long tail and there's massive fragmentation, and there's a lot of liquidity out there. There's a lot of people who want to buy things, professionalize them, scale them, and grow them. I think that will lead to more consolidation. There's a lot of consolidation happened in this little island I'm in at the moment, partly driven by me, partly driven by some of our other sort of competitors. If we look at what Vagasa you mentioned have managed to do, I'll get the number wrong, but something in the region of 160 acquisitions or so. They now face into another challenge, which is really about can you keep growing, and how do you balance that curve of road to profitability versus top line sort of a growth, which I think these businesses have to do at some point if they're going to command the valuations that they sort of command. But I think there'll be consolidation. I think there'll be more natural supply coming into the market, because I think we're seeing more and more individuals that are thinking about what to do with cash where they may have sat at the bank and they may have got relatively low interest rates coming into the market. So to give you another statistic, 50% of every single inquiry that we have now as a new lead, a new potential owner, they haven't acquired the property yet, but they're thinking of buying the property and they're interested coming into the sector. Now, we get on average 30,000 new inquiries a year, so 15,000 roughly coming in. So there's a lot of new supply coming into the market. There's sort of a consolidation. I think there's also a movement between the categories. So, people who maybe have rented it themselves direct, I think the pandemic has led some of those people to realize that it's quite difficult, it's quite challenging. So some of them are moving to property managers to be more professionally managed. And look, as a property manager, we can yield the property better. We can justify our commission better through yield and revenue management and professional services. We're seeing more of that happening as well. So yeah, I think it's all positive, and I'm seeing it across all short-term sort of letting sectors, be it in the traditional sense of holiday homes, cottages, villas, lodges, caravans, boats, you name it. There's a lot of activity going on. So it's a good time to be in our sector, in our category.
I think so, and it's also very interesting how, in a way, we started out our conversation today by saying how things are still in flux in terms of metrics, different metrics and windows, but overall, still, it's positive. So it's like pure stoicism in terms of philosophy, right? There's things you can't control. We're hoping for the best. We think it's going to be good, but some things are still in flux, right? So that's
well, look, but there's tailwinds and the headwinds, and I think there is definitely a lot of tailwinds, but we're facing into some headwinds as well. So the headwind around price, expectations of an owner, expectations of a customer, and value. I think there's the flexibility and the ever-changing regulation as well. I mean, I can't keep up half the time with what is the new set of rules that we should or shouldn't be applying. What legally do we have to do? What's the right thing to do? How do we communicate to an owner as an agent for an owner? What can we just do ourselves? So, that's, we've got 4 different sets of rules in this little small country we're in. But, if you're operating a large global business across, multiple platforms, it must be so difficult. I think the other 2 I would mention, and it would be wrong of me not to mention, one is just around general regulation in our industry. I see it growing. I see more and more of it. I see a lot of people that are misinformed. They're trying to push for regulation and not really fully understanding what problem they're trying to solve. And then the last part, I think this is not a category issue, it is an issue that I think every businesses are facing at the moment, is a war on talent, a real labor shortage. And the pandemic for some reason, a lot of businesses have just woken up and said, we need a digital strategy. We need some really good technology people. We need some good product people. We need to upskill to be able to move fast to accommodate. And talent basically has been headhunted. And the salary inflation in the markets, across lots of categories is just incredible. Never seen anything like it in my 24, 25 years of working in digital.
And isn't it all over this labor shortage? Isn't it all over the whole, I would say, holiday rental value? And since that even cleaners there, like I was reading in the US, there's this report that's just been out by a company called Extend Team, and basically they were saying how the shortage of cleaners, especially in cities, will hit urban rentals even more in the US this year than vacation rental markets, meaning that their growth, which should finally be a positive in the US, will actually be hindered by the lack of cleaners in cities. Is it the same thing you're seeing as well?
Yeah, no, it's exactly the same thing we're seeing. I think I'm probably seeing a bigger delta in the more senior technology roles. It's where people are coming along and the salary increases they're being offered or headhunted is just eye-watering. But I think if I look at the hospitality industry in general, and I go across to our managed service industry, between those two categories, I think there's a real shortage. And so the daily rate, let's just say, that you were paying for a managed service professional is significantly gone up. In little pockets across the UK, we're seeing where there's a real shortage of supply. And what do? Do you pass the price on to the owner? Do you absorb that price? Do you pass the price on to the consumer, et cetera, et cetera? So I think it comes back to the overall challenge of price and inflection point where, you've got to be careful. You could just price yourself out of the market if you're not careful. And then customers are going on holiday. They're almost looking for faults because they feel they have paid too much relative to what the property is actually representing. Whereas before it would be, this seems fair value. Now it's like, is worth what I paid. So we have to be careful.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Reviews, even on your own reviews on your own platform, also reviews on your TAs, are results, are really linked to expectations, and expectations are driven by the price. So fair point. People, we may see even this year, maybe the average review score on, let's say on platforms at least, go down if prices are just too high.
Yeah, in complaints or issues generally are always they're really always in three categories: cleaning, maintenance, and accuracy of description. Those are generally, so we take about 2.5 million people on holiday a year. We don't get an enormous amount of complaints, but I reckon I could categorize 80% of our complaints into those three buckets: parking, COVID, and refunds, and all of that fun stuff that we all went through. Yeah, generally it's sort of a cleaning, and it's an economic model because if you get the cleaning right and the property is well maintained, it leads to higher, say, net promoter scores. It leads to higher feedback scores. It leads to higher rebook rate. It leads to a happier owner because they don't have complaints, etc. And it's just this perfect sort of economic flywheel that happens.
And it loops back into what we said, is that it's again something to talk with the owners, because I do remember at one point I worked for Booking.com and I pulled over data, and about a third of the reviews for people can review on Booking.com, can review property on a cleaning score. They can give it a cleaning score. And actually, I was digging up and looking at data, a third of the complaints about property not being dirty is actually it's a maintenance issue, which means a lot of time it's also some capital expenditure for the owner. There's so much the cleaner can do if things are broken or just not well maintained. And there's been sometimes, again, it's these kind of hard conversations that property manager has to have with the owners and say, well, you kind of have to maintain and invest. So that's also...
So a very small example I can give you is, so I have a property that we rent out via Sykes. It's always good to eat your own dog food. And in the last 12 months, it was only available for one day that it wasn't sold for me to be able to do some sort of a maintenance. clearly that's not acceptable. So, every Friday changeover, we had to sort of, make sure we're doing a thorough check, making sure there's any maintenance that had to be done, but we had a little window. So on one hand, it's amazing, you have all these bookings going in and it's great and people are going on holiday and they're enjoying themselves. But the other hand, your property is it's taking a beating. So you have to, and sometimes it's quite difficult to say to an owner, let's just take less bookings, let's just book in a few maintenance weeks just to make sure that we look after the property, because when there's such high demand, they may be losing out of £2,000, £3,000, £4,000. It's quite a hard conversation.
So my actual last question, Graham, it's been very, very interesting. What can we wish to Sykes Holiday Cottages in 2022?
What can we wish? Do you mean what do I wish, or what can the
What can we wish
on?
to your company? No.
Look, I think we're a fast-moving, relatively sort of a never-happy growth company. The most important thing for us, it's very clear what we're trying to do. We want to take people on holiday. We want to create connections between guests and between owners. And we want to do it in an environmentally and socially responsible way. So a big thing for us in the organization is to say, let's make sure we create these connections, get more supply, get more demand, take them on holiday, have a really good time. But let's find out the best way to do that as sustainably as we possibly can. So the real wish for me is that we can find a way to unlock that. So all parts of all those stakeholders around, our people, our planet, and that purpose sort of it comes together in a meaningful way. That is a big drive for us as an organization. So it's unlocking that during 2022 is going to be a big focus of ours.
Graham Donoghue, thank you so much again. You're CEO of Sykes Holiday Cottages. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights.
Thank you.